All right, so over the weekend and right before the weekend went out, we had a number of polls that came out, a number of state polls that we're going to go over briefly, except the Alaska poll, because Mary Peltola is in the lead for running for governor. And that poll actually gives us a lot of great information. So we're going to delve into that. There is a Yahoo YouGov survey that came out. It was conducted between the 24th and the 28th of July. 1,729 adults with 3.1% plus or minus margin of error. So we're going to go ahead and go over this because we can see Donald Trump has a approval rating of 39% and disapproval of 56. That disapproval rating is about where it normally is at 39%, a little bit of a drop. Now, I mentioned in my last video that his approval and unapproval has been stagnant since the end of April. This maybe shows a dip, but if you aggregate it with the other poll that I showed you, we're still probably around that 44%. But still, if we start seeing a trend, that could be something. We'll go ahead and go into his crosstabs in a second, but let's go ahead and go to this part right here where you have the Democratic and Republican parties, because in the last poll that I showed you that I had on here, the Republicans were a little bit better than Democrats. The Democrats were in crisis mode, and I talked about how Barack Obama had a 20% net approval rating compared to the Democrats. Okay, they don't ask about Barack Obama in this poll, but we do see an increase in favorability for the Democrats. But the most important thing about this poll is we have crosstabs. Now, those low numbers for the Democrats I mentioned in that last poll, that isn't an anomaly. We've seen that in the CNN poll. We've seen that in other polls. The question is, why are those numbers down? Okay, because obviously the MAGA people, the Trump people aren't going to like the Democrats, but there are a lot of Democrats who are not happy with the Democrats, and people who voted for Harris not happy with the Democrats for a number of reasons. So there's room to work there. So we're going to look at that favorability number. But before we continue, let's go ahead and go into the crosstabs for Donald Trump's approval rating, because there's a little bit we can glean from this. As you can see, overall 39% approval to 56% disapproval. If we look at the parties first, so let's look at the parties first. Democrats are where you expect them to be, but 13% of those who identify as Republicans say that they disapprove of the handling of that Trump has. If you can turn those people into either voters who vote for Democrats, which wouldn't happen, but people who won't vote in the next election, that can be what tilts the scales for the Democrats if we have free and fair elections. And honestly, this is one of the reasons I haven't done the channel for a while, because I'm looking at these polls and it's nice, but I'm still in the I don't know if we're going to have free and fair elections camp or not. If we look at those who voted in 2024, obviously the Harris voters are very much disapproving of Trump. But you still, again, of those who voted for Trump, 15% disapproving of his job as president, with 7% strongly disapproving, which is higher than the approval rating that Harris voters have for Trump. So that is a significant number. If enough of those can just be torn off and not turn out to vote, be dissuaded from voting, then that could be something good. Now, as I mentioned, if we look at all voters in 2024, you can see the people who either voted for Harris or Trump, not including those who didn't vote. You can see that the approval rating for Trump goes up to 44%. So overall, when you include the non-voters, it's 39%. But once you take those non-voters away, it goes up to 44%. This is important because what do we have here? We have the 2024 votes. We already talked basically about Harris and Trump already. But look at this non-voting number. 61% disapprove, but look at the weighed number, okay? The weighed number is significantly higher. So these non-voting participants in the poll here account for a lot more of this vote. Now, it is weighed, and it is weighed accurately. I trust YouGov with their weighing. So this is one of our first things right here. If you're the Democrats, you're like, hey, a lot of people who don't vote didn't like Donald Trump, but yet we couldn't get them out to vote. So if you're the Democrats, here's your first target right here, are those people who did not vote. And essentially, those people who identify as independents as well. A lot more people, more partisans are more likely to vote, independents are not. All right, so let's go over to the Democratic Party favorability rating, because this actually gives us a lot of information as well. Now, we're not going to delve um, too much into gender and age, because those are pretty much where you would assume them to be, that more males disapprove, younger voters are a little bit more Democratic, and so on. Same thing with black, white, Hispanic. When it comes to race, the distributions are not really different, except the Hispanic distribution is now even. Sometimes we see it high, sometimes we see it low. It's even in this poll. And 28% of black voters view the Democratic Party as unfavorable. That number starts going up. That should be a worry for the Democrats. So first and foremost, there's our first key indicator right here. But let's get down to this part here where we look at party ID and the 2024 vote. Now, 16% of Democrats, people who identify as Democrats, say they have an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party. Now, the good thing is only 2% of those have a very unfavorable view. So 13% of the 16% have just a somewhat unfavorable. Now, why this is, I don't know. There can be many reasons why this is. A lot of this 13% might just be, which would be mostly of the 16%, might just be that Democrats are not really happy with the direction the party's going by not really fighting or things like this. The criticism that Chuck Schumer has, Hakeem Jeffries has, as far as being very milquetoast in their response to Trump, that it could be more, and this is where I would say maybe it's not unfavorable as much as it is frustration. Okay. So that's a possibility. Of those who identify as independents, a large amount of independents find the Democrats unfavorable. But chances are, if you go to the Republicans, which are the next one, the same, in fact, it's the exact same. 65% of independents see the Democratic Party is unfavorable. 63% see that with the Republican Party. So independents are going to be that way. That's why they're independents. They don't like the other parties. Now, let's look at the Harris, Trump, and non-voting numbers. These are important. As we can see, let's do the non-voting part again. Okay. Of those who didn't vote, 53% have an unfavorable rating of the Democratic Party. That is less than the overall number. So again, 31% have a favorable rating of those non-voting. There are some voters you need to turn out. Find those people who have a favorable rating, favorable view of the Democratic Party who did not vote, take them out. And as I already mentioned, that number in the survey is 588. So we're talking about a big chunk. But this is the most important number here. 29% of Harris supporters, or people who voted for Kamala Harris, 29% of those who voted for Kamala Harris in the last election, have an unfavorable rating of the Democratic Party. Again, as I mentioned before, only 23%, most of that's somewhat unfavorable, 23%, with only 6% very unfavorable. Okay, so you still have to win back voters and have voters confident who voted for you in 2024. So you have nearly a third of Harris voters saying they have an unfavorable opinion of the Democratic Party. So that is very important. Whereas with the Republican Party, you only have 20%, nearly a third of that cut, that Trump voters who have an unfavorable opinion of the Republican Party. So getting your people back on your side, if you're the Democrats, is an important thing. And this is why this 29% number is huge. All right, so let's go ahead and go over to California. California had a poll done. Emerson went ahead and did it in the California governor's race. It does show Katie Porter ahead. Of course, I will link all of this down below. If we look at Katie Porter, she has 28% of Democrats. She has 13% of independents at 18% right now. Of course, this is a jungle primary. She probably is the lead candidate here, but I'll link that down below. Not much to glean out of it because there's 850,000 people in the poll and it is a year out. Now, I brought up this one just because I want to talk about biases in headlines. So, see here, Mike Collins takes early lead in Georgia's Senate showdown, but plurality of voters are undecided. Now, you might think that this is Mike Collins versus Jon Ossoff, like a hypothetical general election matchup, because it doesn't say Republican primary, right? Of course, this is the Daily Caller, who's extremely, extremely right wing. Okay. So, yes, you would look at that. But no, that's not the case. If we go all the way down here, how they have it hidden here, Collins trails Ossoff by just 1 percentage point in a hypothetical matchup, surveying voters 45 to 44%, with just 8% of voters undecided. So, if we're looking at the main, if we're looking at Collins versus Ossoff, yeah, it says a plurality are undecided. No, in that poll, actually, a plurality are decided. Undecided is actually the lowest number, and Ossoff's in the lead. Now, another thing, and people might say, Daily Caller, this is just the headline, but as far as the poll is concerned, Ossoff's up by 1%, but that's expected. Okay, don't expect Ossoff to have 4, 5, 6% lead in this race. This is a tight race, and this is one the Democrats have to win. Remember, Herschel Walker almost won this state in the past. Okay, if Herschel Walker had won, he would have just bumped up Tommy Guberville as the most intelligent senator in the Senate. That's how stupid Herschel Walker was. That's how dumb he was. So don't put it past the voters of Georgia to put somebody in there who's a few clicks smarter than Herschel friggin' Walker. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to show this because it shows how misleading headlines can be. But now let's go ahead and look at Alaska, okay, with Mary Peltola being in the lead, and significantly so. Now, Alaska might be a target state for Democrats. Well, it actually technically is. So if we look here at the DNC list here, target list, we can see Nick Begich, which is weird because the Begich name is usually associated with the Democrats, but Nick Begich is a Republican. His seat is a targeted seat. So that is, money will be going into Alaska. But let's go ahead and delve into this poll a little bit. I'm not going to go into the crosstabs as much today. I might go into the crosstabs a little more in a members only video later on today. But let's see what they have here. So first of all, we can see her approval rating, and we can see that she's at a 52% approval rating, which is the highest in the state. Now, Donald Trump has the highest very favorable, but he also has the highest very unfavorable. So I think this is where, and we can see it's 49 to 50. I think this is where we can see that the state of Alaska is starting to trend. And if we're looking at that next traditional blue state that could go to the Democrats, I'm not saying now or even, in the next presidential election, but in the next 6-7 years, could be Alaska, could be the next election. Who knows? But you do see Peltola at 52% approval. Now, Lisa Murkowski, you see at a negative 23% with Alaskan voters. Okay, that's pretty big. You have a lot of the Republicans, with the exception of Donald Trump, being negative. Okay, Tom Begich, Democrat, is actually +1. Okay, some of these other people I don't know as well. But let's go ahead and go down to Lisa Murkowski, who I mentioned in a video recently that she might be considering running for governor. And this is something that I did not know until I saw this poll, and I was like, wow, because I really haven't seen much polls that have Lisa Murkowski in it. And what we have here is her favorability rating. So this is what surprises me, that her favorability rating has been propped up in Alaska by Democrats and independent or third party people. Republicans since early 2024 have had a negative view of her. And even after her vote for the big beautiful bill, they still see her negatively. Obviously, the big beautiful bill vote caused a drop in both the Democrats and the independents, which makes me think, have the Democrats in Alaska been kind of propping up Lisa Murkowski this whole time? They're so afraid that the Republican is going to lose that they're like, we got to make sure that we vote for Lisa Murkowski, especially with the runoff system they have there now. We have to vote for Lisa Murkowski because we believe that the Democrat can't win. So therefore, we have to vote for her. And is it the Democrats and independents that have been propping her up the whole time? Because if it is, and that means that the Democrats actually really do have a chance in Alaska to win the gubernatorial race. I guess Tony Knowles would have been the last, right before Frank Murkowski, Tony Knowles would have been the last Democratic governor of the state of Alaska, and that's over 20 years ago. Yeah, so this information I found really interesting with Lisa Murkowski. Now, if we want to look at the strength of Mary Peltola, we can see here that if she decided to run for U.S. Senate, let's say she's not running for governor, she's going to run for U.S. Senate, she's only down by 1% in a hypothetical matchup against Dan Sullivan. Okay, it's in the margin of error. This is a tie race. Okay, so we're not talking about her winning this race based off of easy opponents, easy Republican opponents. We're talking about incumbents here. We're talking about big people here. She can be knocked off, or she can knock them off possibly. And to see these numbers against an established person like Dan Sullivan in this case, that to me is pretty strong. Yeah, I mean, that's something that we should keep. I don't think she'll do that, but it's possibly there. I guess it'll be if she can be persuaded one way or the other. Now, this one, we see the hypothetical matchup in the first round for governor, and you see Peltola with a 40%, with all the Republicans behind. Now you see Tom Begich there at 60, the Begich who's the Democrat. We don't have Lisa Murkowski in here. Lisa Murkowski's in here, that might change everything. But here's the thing, if you got to look at it this way, if this is the approval rating, how low the approval rating is for Lisa Murkowski amongst Republicans, the hate that Republicans have for Murkowski could actually lead to either people not voting or just because they're so mad, vote for the Democrat anyway, which would be Peltola, right? So, and then if we go to the ranked choice voting here, we see she wins 54%, easily beating the other Republicans there. So I did not look at these originally, but I guess we'll look at these now. Yeah, you have the Republican Party vote split, but even though this is a good sign, and I'll go into this maybe into a members only video later, because you got the gist of what we have here in the poll here. The Democrats are in a good position in Alaska. I'm wondering where, if you, in this poll, if you do put Murkowski, how that really changes things. The only thing I'd like to see, if we can maybe see if they have Murkowski's favorability rating in here and see where she's losing. Okay, so here we go. Murkowski's favorability rating. Okay, of those who are Republicans, 60% have an unfavorable rating, very unfavorable, not just unfavorable, very unfavorable rating of Lisa Murkowski. The Democrats can use that to their advantage, and it's come to this weird dynamic. Whoever thought we'd get to this? I didn't even think of this. Comes to this weird dynamic that the Democrats always want to make sure the Tea Party person won, or the right-winger one, like a Sarah Palin or somebody like that, so that they could be against a weak candidate for the general. Is Lisa Murkowski now that candidate? Is it now going to the center in a place like Alaska, that if it were Peltola versus Murkowski, that it actually would be better? Voters do not like Lisa Murkowski, and this is a possible, whenever she's up for re-election, this is possible Senate pickup for them. So what would that be? So that would still be 4 years from now, or 3 years from now. But yeah, voters do not like her. So her overall unfavorable rating for the Republicans is 74%. Her overall favorable rating, I mean, name me any other politician in the United States, maybe Susan Collins, but I highly doubt it, Name me any other politician in the United States where a person of the other party, Lisa Murkowski being a Republican, actually has a significantly higher favorable rating with the Democrats than the Republicans. This tells me Democrats, all you're doing is propping her up. You got to cut that line, let that bait loose. Okay? Let that fish loose, let it go. We are, and I say progressives, Democrats, those of us who are against Republicans, we're in a position to cast Lisa Murkowski away. And actually, if we use that number to our advantage, we can actually move ahead. All right, well, that's all I want to talk about in the polls today. Thank you very much. Maybe later today in a members only poll, I'll go specifically into this Alaska poll, which I think is a very interesting poll. But some of the numbers look good for Democrats. All right, thank you all very much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.